Welcome to Unschooling Conversations. Today I'm joined by Alice from Organic Education, and in this episode we are going to talk about community. My name is Heidi Steel. I am a former teacher and unschooling parent to 4 school-aged children who are happy living and learning as they go. We have been unschooling for over 10 years, and I regularly blog and offer mentoring and coaching courses, which you can find out more about on liveplaylearn.org, or you can come and join us on Facebook at Live Play Learn, where I provide daily support and encouragement for unschooling families. Today I'm joined by Alice for a conversation on community in the home educating world. Welcome, Alice.
Hello, thank you.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, of course. My name is Alice Khimasia, and my husband Krish and I have been unschooling our 4 boys for over 12 years now. They're quite big these days. They're now 20, 18, 16 and 9. So we're kind of in a different season where it's a lot of the time now it's me and my smallest son, and the older 3 are doing their own thing. So yeah, I've got quite a few years of experience to draw upon to encourage people here. You can find me online at Organic Education on Facebook, although I'm so social media'd out, if I'm honest. So I think Heidi and I are going to speak a bit today about building in real life community, which is really welcome to lots of us after the lockdowns. So yeah, looking forward to our conversation. Good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alice. Of course, regular listeners will know that Alice joined me on a previous episode where we talked about teenagers and self-directed education and unschooling through the teen years. And I've been joined by Krish, her husband, where we talked about maths as well, as he has the experience and expertise of being a secondary maths teacher, but also unschooling his own sons. So you can tune in to listen to those as well. But as we said, today we're going to talk about community. So I wondered if we might start right at the beginning and think a little bit about how you found physically found your local home ed community when you first started home educating.
Yeah, of course. Great to start at the beginning. It feels a long time ago, and the world was really different because this was the days before social media connected us all. So I remember I didn't know any home educators, and we were living in a small town at that time, with kind of villages dispersed around. And so I had the Education Otherwise mailing list that came to me, and that directed me to my local home education group, which actually was about half an hour away by car, so it wasn't really that local, but we did set out there and find a lively home education group of people meeting regularly with a lovely program of activities. And I also found through the Education Otherwise list my geographically nearest home educator, who actually turned out to be Harriet Patterson, who some of you might have heard of and know, because she does some wonderful research into learning outside of school, particularly in how children learn to read. And she's quite an inspiration. So she was actually the first home educator that I met. And I remember sitting in her kitchen having a cup of tea with my small boys, and her youngest son, her son then was about 11. So she was some way ahead of me. And I remember that conversation and what an encouragement it was to me at that time, and how she encouraged me to pursue my children's interests and to build our education, our learning around their interests. So that kind of autonomous child-led learning really came across from her to me, which was the way that I was inspired to go anyway at that point. So it was wonderful to meet her. And she was in another village not so far away from me, but it turned out there was only one other home educating family in our whole town at that time. So it was very different. But what I found is that once we had connected just with a few people and we'd found this one group, it was a kind of snowball effect then, because you found yourself then discovering other things that were going on and meeting people that knew these people, and so it was like this network opened up to us. And I found that what we found was there were people that we particularly connected with. In some cases it was the boys that connected with other children, or it was me that particularly found a connection with another parent, and found we were quite like-minded. And so then we would meet up in smaller groups or one-to-one just with another family. And I found that was particularly valuable to us. And my sons often say that they prefer meeting in smaller settings and one-to-ones rather than in big groups. So it depends very much, doesn't it, on you, your personality, your children and their personalities, what you need from a community.
We had a similar, really, although I think I did find our initial community on social media. I can't quite remember what initiated it. I think I might have put like a post up saying that we were home educating, or somebody passed me, or I might have mentioned it to someone in our local community, like outside our front door. Anyway, somebody passed me the information of a lady they knew that was home educating. Right. And as it happened, a little bit like similar to you, we lived in a town which was surrounded by small villages. And as it happened, in fact, there were two ladies. I remember the first time we met in a play park, and I took the children along. And both of these ladies happened to be unschooling. Yeah. And we had already sort of decided that's what we were going to do, although I didn't realise it was called unschooling at the time. But I knew that we were going to be sort of child-led and autonomous and those and interest-led. And so I guess maybe we hit the jackpot, like with the first families that we met. One of those ladies moved away, and the other lady I'm still friends with today. So that's, over 11 years now. And like you said, we found that once we'd made these initial contacts, our network just sort of like grew organically, because they were in contact with other people. They knew other people in the town or in the villages around that were home educating, and where there might be a meet. So they would then say to me, actually, we're meeting in this place next week. That will be suitable for your your young children. And it grew, and like that network, snowballed. I like that word. Snowballed, and we met a lot of people. One of the things that happened to us, I don't know if this happened to you as well, but like when we were trying different things and going to different meets, there were definitely some that we only went to once. Like we didn't go back. They were not a good fit. I made a real effort to find people and places that were going to be a good fit for the style of life that we led, so that my children were free to pursue that. And like you said, sometimes the children made those contacts and we followed those up with play dates. Yeah. And very similar to you, actually, my guys at that point preferred sort of one-to-one or family-to-family meets rather than large group things. So we followed those up with play dates, and sometimes it was me that found, another parent that was like-minded and supportive of what we were doing, and we would continue our getting to know each other, but maybe not through one-to-ones, play dates
with the children,
but maybe with the children. That was more social media based, like just chatting and emailing and things. But again, those things are still, you know, those people that I met then are people I still know now. So it's worth going through that process of finding groups, trying them out, seeing who you connect with, following up with play dates. There is sort of an effort that needs to be made, because we don't have that ready-made, you know, this is your school, this is your classroom, these are the parents, and that's like a ready-made a ready meal, ready-made community for you, however that works out or has worked out for you, you know. But this isn't sort of ready-made. There needs to be a little bit of purpose and conscious effort in
it's different, isn't it? It requires, I've always said that it does require effort, but then you find that once you've made those connections and you find your circles and you found those friendships, then you know, it gets easier. But putting yourself out there in the beginning, you know, that can be quite hard, especially if you're quite an introvert. And I know that in the beginning I felt like we needed groups more, because when it's all new and you're starting out and you're kind of finding your way, you need those conversations with other people, don't you? That encouragement, and to feel that, you know, there are other people on this journey too. And those are the, you know, those can be great connecting points. And I think, you know, it's much easier now, isn't it, to find these groups on social media. I mean, if you put in your town and home educators, you'll find local groups, and through there you'll find different things going on. And, you know, like Heidi said, not all of them will be a good fit. And, you know, so don't be discouraged if you go out to a group and you just think, oh my goodness, that didn't work for us, that didn't feel, don't be discouraged by that. Go and try something else. And because there's more around these days, and there's so many different you know, different styles of groups and different ways of connecting with community in the home education world.
You can now support the podcast on Ko-fi, that's Ko-fi, where you can contribute via a one-off collection of £5, or by subscribing monthly. Monthly subscribers receive pre-releases on blog posts, previews for the podcasts, and free access to monthly webinars and more, as a thank you for your ongoing support. So if you are a regular listener, I would like to invite you to contribute via kofi.com/live-play-learn. Of course, if that's not within your capabilities right now, I continue to welcome you here just as you are, and thank you for listening and taking time to consider unschooling in your family. And now back to our unschooling conversation.
So what do the groups that you have attended, or, you know, that you go to, what do the ones that have been successful for you, what have those actually looked like, or what have you got going on now even?
That's lots of questions.
That is a lot of questions. I'm really sorry.
Well, let me think. Going back to the early days, there were groups where you'd sort of gather quite informally, that were quite play based, and then there would be other groups that were a little bit more active. There'd be an activity or a bit more of a structure. And then we found that as we branched off from that, we kind of found some like-minded folks, and we had little kind of pop-up learning communities where we would perhaps get together to do something specific. Like I remember there was a brilliant time when we were looking at different parts of the body, and everybody came together and shared the part of the body that they had been learning about. So each family did a different part of the anatomy, and these were people that we got to know, and so the children were quite comfortable, but it was brilliant because everybody did something that was so different, and so engaging. We didn't have anywhere near enough time because everyone had got all these wonderful activities, And that was very quite early in our home ed journey, but I remember it because it was really fun, and it really brought the learning to life. It was very tangible. And we had other things where I remember we used to do skill shares. So the children would come with a particular skill something that they loved to do or that they were good at, to share with the rest of the group. And it's so varied. Again, amazing things that children are into and interested in, from Rubik's cubes to 3D drawing to animation to guitar playing and drumming. Just a whole range of different things. And again, that was brilliant because it really empowered the children to be able to share something that they were good at. And I remember particularly one of my boys sitting with he was quite little at the time, about 7 or 8, sitting with a teenage girl, sharing these different skills that they had. And I just was watching thinking, gosh, never in a schooled world would this teenage girl and this 7 or 8-year-old little lad be sitting together like that and exchanging what they knew. But there was a genuine interest in what the other was offering. It was really, really great. So I have really good memories of many group activities that we engaged in. I remember Krish doing some really lovely maths workshops for our little communities. Again, very practical, tangible, kind of playing with mathematical concepts, and parents contributing their own passions and enthusiasms and sharing those within our groups. So there was lots of that. It was good.
Yeah, I love all those different aspects that you brought in there. So we've got a lovely local group at the moment that just offers park meetups, and it's the same 2 days every week. And one of those days they alternate different parks around our area, which helps accommodate people that maybe can't travel so far, or need to get a bus, things like that. And the second day is the same park on that day every week, really regular, so people know that they're there, and it really enables. And they're there all day. But it's really flexible because it really, and which as unschoolers I really like, because that really means that you can turn up for half an hour or you can be there for 4 hours, and it's the same people, but it also means that if you can't make one week, they will be there the next week. It's really grown actually, and has been a really good space for people just to be relaxed in, and for the children to get to know each other as well. But we've, similar to you, we've done like interest-based offerings, I guess, within our local community. Some people, we hosted like we called it Lego Club. So we hired a hall and invited anyone that wanted to come and play Lego with us to come and join us. And then we were able to take what the children were doing and then say, well, next time, you guys have done, we had like little competitions that they wanted to do, and then one week they wanted to sort of build stuff and then like display what they'd done, and then sometimes we'd do like little, like a quite, I would say, schooly reflect things that we've done in school, like little show and tell about what they've done, and little challenges, and similar, we've done art-based things. And you reminded me of like those showcasing events where we've hired a hall, and then each or every child that wants to comes along and says, I've been doing this, I've been learning about origami, and they come along and they sit and they show everyone else how to make something in origami, and they will sit and make things together. Or they put on like a little display about their Pokemon Go and what they've achieved, and then they take everybody out, they show them how to download the app, and they all go out and do Pokemon together in just outside in the field. Or I'm trying to think what else other people brought to those. We did those for several, I can't remember, maybe once every couple of months for a while, for a couple of years. But yeah, I'd sort of forgotten about that really. And like you say, you know, that cross-generational thing, you know, those were families that had, you know, babies in slings. Obviously they may not have been contributing, they had siblings, but you know, they were there were babies in slings there, you know, right up until you know, people in their young people, you know, in their teens, and the adults joining in as well. And it has a different, I forgot about that aspect of it, that different vibe that it's cross-generational, you know, multi-generational, getting together, and I'd forgotten about that actually.
I love that, because everybody can be an expert, can't they, in the thing that they're sharing. It's great, and it's very empowering, I think, for young people, for all of us, to learn from one another. It's brilliant. We had, I remember there was also we somehow this little group of families came across a farmer. We met a farmer, I can't remember how, but she had farm space on her farm, and she was really keen to you know, be connecting children really with the land, and helping them to understand where their food came from and farming, and so she wanted to open up her farm, and so she was really happy for us to use her barn. Like I think it was weekly, we met there weekly. So again, like you were saying with the park, we had this farm space for a while, and it was brilliant. There was such potential to just, you know, explore and to discover the different animals and learn more about what was going on the farm and what they were growing, and that was a really good stretch of time where we met there for a week every week. So yeah, those sorts of regular connections with the same small group of people, where you can really forge relationships and get to know each other. And I found it as a parent so valuable to be alongside other people's children, and for my boys to have, you know, those relationships with other adults. That was also really important, I think, over the years.
We've got so we've recently started meeting, we've sort of created it's sort of explicitly for teens, a teen meet, and we found a cafe where we can go, and they've got like shelves of board games. We've started taking our own actually, but you know, they really you know, it's a place where that's encouraged, so that the teens meet and play board games, but all of the families, or most of the families that go, have got younger ones as well, and one of the ladies that comes brings her teen, but she stays and she plays with the younger ones, and actually this is one of that's her again, this is the lady I met when I first started home educating. So now her youngest is, you know, teenage, and then she's got a couple of older ones as well, but it means that my younger children have known her for a really long time. Nice. And they're really comfortable like playing games with her. In fact, now my 7-year-old will say, oh, let's take Genius Square, because she really, I know, that's why we bought it, recommended on the podcast, we love it. Let's take that, because she really likes playing that, and it's really, it's brilliant. And similar to, you know, we've got friends now, you know, it's sort of that interchanging of adults. Children feel comfortable with different adults, and that's this is really bringing out lots of things I hadn't thought of actually, but that you know, how children feel comfortable with another adult, or an older child, and that they feel safe with them.
And it's those intergenerational relationships that you mentioned. It's important, and it's enriching. And I love too that, you know, we've just mentioned a farm, we've mentioned a cafe. I love the idea that anywhere can become a community learning space, and I think that, you know, when we claim those spaces and move into them and utilize them, that's really enriching. And we've done lots of that. I think we moved when my youngest son was about 2, we moved to a much larger city, and so our context changed, and it's always, you know, it's quite difficult, isn't it, uprooting and moving somewhere new, and then having to sort of re-establish community and to find those new connections, and in the city it was different, because you know, where we had been, people were quite dispersed, and the city, think it's kind of more centralized. So it was a sort of quite a different context, but again, we found people. I think by then there was social media, so we were able to then look up our local groups, but we found people, and even if you find one person, often, as you said, Heidi, that then leads you to others. And I always feel with home education and, you know, with unschooling, it's like this kind of subculture, isn't it? And once you're off the main bandwagon and you dive into it, you find all these wonderful things happening, this kind of subculture that you didn't notice really before. And it's wonderful, and it's wonderfully varied. So persevere with seeking out what works for you and your children, because you will find connection, and it's so important. And we found, like, now it looks different, and as your children grow it looks different, and sometimes it looks like, you know, the tennis club. I use that example because my third son, Noah, is mad keen on tennis. I say it's like his other home, our local tennis club, but it really is. But for him, that is a major point of community. But we've moved into that as a home educating community, because we set up, because of his passion, really. We set up a home education group with his coach up there weekly, which will start up again actually soon, because we play from spring to October. And that's attracted lots of particularly new families actually, who are quite new to the scene, and they find coming along to the tennis group is quite a good way to just meet some people, and the mums can have a chat, the kids are playing, they've got something to do, and they seem to enjoy what the coach offers. And that's been good. And I found for my Noah, he's 16 now, incredibly, but he and some of the other older kids have been coaching the younger ones alongside their coach, helping him to run it, and it's become a lovely opportunity for them as well to help with the younger children. And the younger kids love that, because they love, you know, the input of older ones. So that's another relationship dynamic that happens. And my Elias, my eldest son, who's 20 now, but for him, Scouts was a fantastic community, in the place we lived originally, and then when we moved to the city, and he found wonderful friends and great relationships with the leaders, and fabulous opportunities to be outdoors and challenging himself, which was really important, particularly through his teens. He was the kind of kid who needed big challenges, far beyond what I could offer him, really. So, you know, for him, Scouts was a really important community. So yeah, I think there's such a variety of expressions of the way that community can look, you know, beyond the school walls.
Yeah, that's really brought something up for me actually, which is about social media. Even when we find our local home ed community, like, you know, there's a saying that goes, you know, there's as many ways to home educate as there are home educators. You know, it's not everybody is unschooling.
No.
And it can be maybe not tricky, but, you know, we're going back to that effort and putting conscious effort into finding good fits for ourselves. But one of the things that happens on social media, from my experience in our area, is that there's quite often a lot of people that put up set classes, set groups, set events going on that require, you know, ongoing commitment, and that can take up a lot of room on the group chats and on the, you know, the feeds, and it can be harder to pull out things that maybe are a good start for people who are looking at interest-led and autonomous educators. So I was thinking about what that might look like, and I think it comes down to that being interest-led. So if you can join something that your children are interested in, then they can make connections with other people who are also interested in those things, or social needs. So, you know, things that are, we're meeting in the park for the afternoon, which of course, you know, that sort of picks up during the warmer months, you know, going to things that are, you know, a little bit more play-based, a little bit more relaxed, and starting in those, starting in those places and meeting people in those environments, which are in line with, maybe in line with where you are hoping to be, where you are, not where you're hoping to be, where you are and what you are doing. I know that you've got some interest in real life community building, encouraging, supporting things going on. Would you like to, I mean, we're giving people loads of ideas, aren't we? But, you know, what does that look, you know, we've talked about what that looked like in the beginning. Let's bring it up to date. What does that look like
let's
for you
talk
now?
about now. Well, I'm the kind of person who I quite enjoy building community, and I know that that isn't everybody's thing. Like, it isn't something that maybe comes as easily to everyone. But I always think to myself, if you can't really find what you're looking for or what you're wanting, build it, you know, because there's bound to be other people out there who are thinking the same thing. You know, if there's a gap there, then let's try to fill it and build something. So there's been a few kind of experiments, if you like, over the years. From my end, we had a kind of learning community that I think we met, probably it must have been for 18 months to 2 years, where it was an interesting experiment in unschooling together. So learning autonomously, but in community, which is almost like a bit of a paradox. So we were like, well, how can we be pursuing our own learning interests, but together? And that was our sort of experiment. And what was really interesting about it was I reached out online through some of my own connections that I had forged locally, and tried to see if there were people who were interested in that concept and exploring that idea together. And actually that was quite good from the outset, because it meant I was quite clear in what we were trying to do, and were there other people who wanted to join me on that journey. And there was a kind of a process of talking to people to find out if that was going to be the right thing. Was it going to be a good fit? Were we kind of on the same page? It was actually Reggio inspired. I don't know if you know much about the Reggio Emilia, but I love it. And so I talked to people that expressed interest, and we ended up with 6 families. I think there were 12 children and 6 mums, ranging in age, from 5 up to early teens. And we did this adventuring together for a good 18 months, it must have been, and it was really interesting and valuable, and exploratory, and not all of it was great success. You know, we learned some lessons. It wasn't always easy to decide which interests we were going to pursue together. How did we share what we were really interested in right now with the group? And it was a very good process, because there's something very valuable, isn't there, in collaborating and in learning to communicate and work with others, and grow and learn together, even when pursuing our own passions and interests. So it was great. And like we were talking earlier about using lots of different spaces, we met in the local library. We met in a local kind of art gallery that had a play space, a Reggio play space, which was aimed at preschoolers and babies. And they had a baby preschool session weekly in this wonderful space. But it was set up as a Reggio exploratory room. So we asked if we could use it with our children of multiple ages as a play space, and they were really open to it. So we had some brilliant meetups there, and in locations near there around the city centre, in cafes, trying to remember all, in different parks. We visited a local castle. We were all over the place. We just kind of followed where the interests were taking us, and we had a sort of learning journal for the group where the children could put everything that was interesting to them, what they were learning about, so we could share what we were doing with each other. And it was really valuable. Scrap store, that was a great place to meet. So it was very exploratory and experimental. From that experience, I'm doing something new through my organic education page, which obviously attracts people who are unschooling, and who my particular way of learning with my family resonates with. So through that, I put out a call to see if people were interested in building a real life community within our area of the West Midlands, and people were. So I thought, okay, there's obviously, this is resonating with people obviously are looking for this. So we're having, and it's going to be informal. It's going to be, the first meetup is this month, actually, meeting in a park locally. And we'll just bring some things that we'll lay out that kids might want to engage with or not. There's a play park, there's a cafe, there's lots of space, and we'll connect. And to me, particularly coming out of these lockdown years, that is going to be so valuable. And we'll see, Heidi, where it takes us, and how it evolves, and and what other people bring into that mix and how they want it to develop. And that's the value, isn't it, of being in community. So I'm excited about it. Yeah,
I love that you put in there about how this unfolds, because just in the last so we started talking about how things were and in the beginning and what that looked like, and we've come up with this really long, people need to remember that we're talking about a 10-year expanse of time.
Yes.
When we're coming out with all these things that have happened, and all these places that we've met, and these people that we've got to know, but to remember that those things sort of unfolded naturally. They were things that popped up on our Facebook groups or other social media, and things that we've purposefully set out to create. But that it is part of the journey. Like, some of those things are successful and others of those things are less so. And I think people worry about that, the future. They're worried about, what is this going to look like next year when we still haven't found friends, when we still haven't found community, and actually, not to worry about the future so much, but to look at, like, what can we do now, and that what is happening now, if it's good, then you keep doing it for as long as that's working, and then those things sort of naturally pass. And we were talking before we even started recording about seasons and how things change. Things don't stay the same forever. That moves on and looks different. So we explore different ways that we can meet. Different things are young people. My young people now, my teens, are now interested in playing board games with their friends. So that's what we did. 10 years ago it was Lego. So we sort of change. As our family changes, and as our children's needs change as well.
That's
true. Anything else we were going to bring to that?
I was down this today, actually, talking about what's going on now. The other thing that's quite exciting that we've started doing up here is an allotment. And I've noticed, actually, on a few home ed groups recently, this idea of, and in our case, the allotment idea came out of lockdown, actually, because it's a place to meet up in the open air, and for me, it's an important response to what's happening to our climate, that we get our hands in the earth, and that we encourage our children to get their hands in the earth and think about how we grow food. So today, actually, we had our first allotment meetup of the spring, digging over the allotment, and again, I've opened that up to new families who might want to come and get engaged. Not necessarily unschooling families, actually. This is a kind of local community thing, so it's local friends and families, but a lot of the unschooling community also picked up on it, so it's a lovely kind of intersection of my life on the allotment. But that's, again, it's an interesting space to share and to understand that wherever we are, right, our kids are learning and they're connecting with different people and engaging. And I think it's really important for our children to see us doing that and to learn to build communities. And it's so enriching, I think, for them, like we were saying, around their own interests, to find the means of connecting with like-minded people. And I think that as my boys have grown into their teens, that's been really important for them in terms of finding mentorship. And you know, I'm a mum of four boys, and I can see how growing up through their teens, that's just been such a valuable experience for them. You know, Elias, the engineer, he's my young keen engineer, but he had there were some guys up the road, neighbours, they were students who lived a few doors down, who would always be out on the front drive tinkering with cars. And I remember he'd go around and sort of watch them and just see what they were doing, and he forged these sorts of connections with people in our neighbourhood who were interested in cars. And it still happens out on the front here. He's got this Land Rover project he's still working on, and you know, the neighbours come and they chat about cars, and these young men come and go, and it's like, but it's lovely to see him, you know, forging those connections around that interest that he has that's so strong. So you know, our kids are watching, aren't they, and they're seeing how we do this and how we connect with people. And I think that, you know, for unschooling parents, it can feel like such a big responsibility, especially when you're first starting out on the journey. It's such a big weight on your shoulders, and I think it's just really important to remember that it isn't all on our shoulders, right? That we're part of families and communities where our children can forge these other relationships, and it's much bigger than us, and that actually it does take a village, and we need each other, we need community. We need community, they need community. So it really is worth the effort, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I
was thinking that might be our conclusion, actually, that it's worth the effort, because we've mentioned effort, and we've mentioned you know, consciously going out there and finding community, because it's not handed to us. So yeah, it is worth absolutely worth the effort. And I say that as someone who has on more than one occasion come back from events I've taken my children to and cried because they were such a bad fit for us, you know, and it didn't feel like it was worth the effort then. It felt really hard, but then, you know, to gather ourselves and to go out and try again and find people and places and families, and accepting too that not every place will be the right fit, and that's okay. You know, you don't have to persist with something that really isn't working. You know, there'll be something else, or you can create something else that is a better fit. Yeah, I think and it's also okay if you find yourself connecting with other adults in that space but your children aren't connecting. It's also, you know, it's okay to like continue those adult relationships, you know, even if it does have to be less in person, because, you know, your children don't, you know, connect with their children, so that's not going to work in person, but to continue those conversations. I don't know, swapping phone numbers or emails, or whatever it happens to be, just so that you have that connection and that support for yourself. Which reminds me that actually one of the things that happened regularly in the beginning was somebody local to us set up an adults, I mean, it was called adults only, it was in the evenings, and sort of young children / babies, or people, little ones that were being breastfed, they came along as well. But the idea was it was for adults who were home educating, and there were people there that were, following all different sorts of styles in their families. But that alone was really lovely, to be in an adult space with people outside of the education system. And sometimes we talked about education, and sometimes we just talked about life,
Life.
other stuff that's going on in life, or just life with children. And that was really, that was something else that was really valuable, I think. In fact, I know it was really valuable. I've got lots of lovely stories from evenings there, and again, still in contact with people that were there, many of whom have sort of moved away. So that just reminded me of that. You mentioned mentorship in your when you were talking a minute ago, and I know that you have got 4 boys, and that 3 of them in particular are older now. So what does community look like for them now they're in work, really, effectively? I wanted to talk about that, because as my sons have got older, they've actually, the route that they've ended up going, the older 2 particularly, is into apprenticeships, and if you can find an apprenticeship that fits there, I mean, my experience of them is great. But one of the things I really like is the fact that they've moved into work community, and they're out there now in the world, forging these relationships at work and becoming part of this working community. And in many ways, it feels to me like a continuation of their unschooling journey, really, in the way that they've moved into the workplace. Both of them actually kind of aligned with what they're interested in, which is really wonderful for me to see. And I can see in both instances, it's quite, because of the nature of the work, it's quite a male environment, but they've been sort of embraced into that as young men, and so it feels a bit like a kind of rite of passage, and they're growing into their own communities in their workspaces. And so that's been really important, I think, in that transitioning from unschooling into the workplace. And it's been really good to see. I hope people today have who have been joined us and are listening know from our conversation how important community is. Will be encouraged to boldly go and seek the community that they need for themselves and for their children.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice.
Good to be with you. Thank you.